Well, on May the 1st, 2011, up popped this tweet. Helicopter hovering above Abbotsford at 1 a.m. is a rare event. Well, this Pakistani man had recently moved to this quiet area with his family from the busy and dangerous Islamabad, and so he was surprised because it was unusual to hear a helicopter in the sky. And he was even more surprised by a very sudden explosion nearby his house. And so for the next few hours, Sohaib tweeted out everything he could see or hear to his few hundred followers on Twitter, debating whether it was the Taliban or some other forces in the area. And so a number of updates on Twitter later, he went off to sleep. Well, a few hours later, he woke up to worldwide news. Osama bin Laden was dead. Well, he clicked on his Twitter account to a new kind of explosion. Thousands of new followers from around the world and hundreds of news outlets all trying to get a piece of Sohaib for comment. And so he tweeted out this, now I'm the guy who live blogged the Osama raid without knowing it. And so from that moment, Sohaib went from obscurity to celebrity. He was the first Pakistani to get over 100,000 followers, a marriage proposal, trips to the US, and floods of people from around the world came to his family-owned local coffee shop. He went from obscurity to celebrity overnight. Welcome to this part of the world, this time that we live in, where you can go from obscurity to celebrity overnight. Well, we are in our third week of this series in Daniel called Living by Faith in Exile. And we've seen that it's a book that's very relevant for our particular cultural moment. We're in the West, we're no longer in Christendom. What that means is that we don't have the cultural influence that we once had, particularly in the spheres of government, education, and the media. And so what we've said is that without resignation and without worry and without anger, Christians actually need to learn to live in a new way. They need to learn to live in a post-Christian society. And so in the first 2 weeks, we have seen that this means being people who return to walking the Calvary Road, who do not separate themselves from culture, and who do not get sucked in by the culture, but who learn to live as a creative minority, a loyal community, or a stubbornly loyal community of Christ followers who stand firm and yet live winsome lives to our culture. We saw that in the first week, this means living with resilience rather than relevance. Often the church has tried to be relevant, but what we need is we need to be resilient. And we saw that Daniel actually opened with something that was quite peculiar, not worrying about his own plight. He worried most about the vessels of the temple that had been taken out of the temple. What this represented was the glory and the holiness of God, and that was his first concern, that Nebuchadnezzar had taken them out of the temple, something that was holy and glorious, and profaned it. That just means made it ordinary. He made it ordinary. He took these glorious vessels and put them in his museums. And so what we saw that is to live as a creative minority, we need to have a passion for God's glory. We need to be people who live resilient lives, not just being relevant. In the second week, we saw that Daniel, despite all this enculturation, being pressured to live a certain way, to be Babylonianized, he resolved not to defile himself. And so we saw that we need to become people of no compromise. Well, last week, you saw that I stopped short, and I didn't actually say what happened when he decided not to compromise. And basically what happens, as Kerry read out for us, is you have the world's first clinical trial, a 10-day test, to see what the diet, his vegetable diet, would produce. And in verse 20, we see this. And know in every matter of wisdom and understanding, about which the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters that were in his kingdom. Now, what does this mean? What does this mean? There's two observations I have here. Firstly, does this mean that if you do the right thing, that God will make you 10 times better than those around you? In fact, that is one of the big questions of this message. What made Daniel 10 times better? That idea of 10 times better is really a saying for more complete. What made Daniel more complete in the eyes of Nebuchadnezzar and his culture so that he was able to last the distance in exile? It says here that he lasted the 70 years until King Cyrus. He lasted the whole time. What was it about him that made him more complete in the eyes of the culture? That's the first observation. The second one is that even though Nebuchadnezzar has not submitted to Daniel's God, he's still very religious. He's still very religious. The reason he surrounded himself with magicians and enchanters was because of cultural polytheism. He believed in multiple gods in the culture. And so his attempt was to be connected to the one which was pouring out the blessing at the time. Now that sounds nothing like our culture, does it? To be kind of connected to the thing that's going to, and love the thing that's going to give you what you want. Now, we look around our culture and we see that we're a culture that loves our demigods, minor deities that kind of occupy our mind and our imagination and our time and all those sorts of things. And so my point is that though we are post-Christian, we are not post-religious. Though we are post-Christian, we're not post-religious. What I mean is that though our culture still desires what is transcendent, what is otherworldly, we desire the possibility of being able to lose yourself, even if it's just for a moment. Case in point, the resurgence of Eastern meditation and emptying your mind and kind of finding a place of personal ecstasy. And so think of it like this. Think of it like a door. You open the door and you look up a staircase. And at the top of the staircase, there is light shining out of it. And every person internally has this understanding that we need to climb those steps and see what's at the top, what is actually shining bright, to actually find yourself in a place that is beyond yourself. And so we are post-Christian, but we're not post-religious. And here's three very clear indicators of it. The first thing is the cult of celebrity. The cult of celebrity, or you might say the Sohaib phenomenon, where you can go from obscurity to celebrity overnight. And this is the kind of phenomenon where basically to eat is a basic human need, but now we have celebrity chefs and we basically glamorize through images on Instagram what it means to eat. Or you could love the game of football and be good enough to play it professionally, and all of a sudden culture's asking you your opinion on refugees and same-sex marriage and all this sort of stuff. And all you are is good at football. But our culture wants to kind of look up to these heroes, wants to be able to hear their opinion on things that matter to us. But we also don't mind that they drive the best cars and they're a little bit promiscuous, as long as they're kicking goals for our team. And then if they're not kicking goals for our team, we just move on to adore somebody new. There's an insatiable hunger in us to rush toward the hero of the moment. And now this possibility of celebrity, it is both a distant dream and yet it is tantalizingly close for all of us, isn't it? You're one opportune moment away, one Twitter away, you're one YouTube video away from being famous, even if it's just for 15 minutes. And so it's a distant dream, but it's also tantalizingly close for everyone. We can go from obscurity to celebrity without any special ability because we are post-Christian, but we're not post-religion. We need cultural demigods. We need something to sort of fill our imagination. So that's the first thing, the cult of celebrity. The second indicator is constant stimulation. Constant stimulation. In the past, individuals and communities have been stimulated by more interpersonal, face-to-face communication. Information was just consumed through a once-a-day newspaper. But today we have a constant flow of information where you can be reading about a terrorist attack in 1 second, and the very next second seeing like your girlfriend's latest haircut, which she's just stepped out of the salon with. And then thirdly, you can be like posting a photo of your avocado on toast on Instagram. And so we are like constantly stimulated by this kind of information coming in and going out. And now society is actually working out how to deal with social media addiction. Constant stimulation, constant news feed, but it's because we all need to be stimulated somehow. We're looking for something to grip us, bring us joy and satisfaction, and so we keep scrolling down our feed until we find it. In fact, Facebook is actually quite a good metaphor for life. You scroll down your feed till you find something that interests you, you stop, Okay, that's done, and you keep on scrolling. You keep on scrolling, and this kind of describes the search that we have for stimulation. And so we're post-Christian, but we're not post-religious. We're looking for spiritual and intellectual stimulation. Thirdly, we're craving the good life. We crave the good life. You know, when our Western culture was aristocratic, so when we had a king and when we had a queen, they were the only ones who lived the good life. And your life was determined by what family you were born into. Everyone else was just a commoner. But democracy brought in some good changes, didn't it? With hard work and discipline, you can make it anywhere. You can start from anywhere and you can end up anywhere. And now we love more than anything that kind of rags to riches story. We love that. We kind of very engaged with that. And so our culture holds out this image of the good life where through determination you can be better than the rest even if you started with nothing. But where that sort of takes a nasty turn and looks very ugly is when it descends into constant comparison, looking to the left and looking to the right to see what other people have, just so that we can kind of work our way up to get our version and our fill of the good life. We have a sense of wanting to be better. Why? Because though we're post-Christian, we're not post-religious. And so this is the demigod religion of our culture, celebrity stimulation, and a craving for the good life. But what puts this surrogate religion to the test is when something like this happens. The Manchester attacks that happened, the terrorist attacks. And so we have amazing looking famous people. And we have more information than ever. And we have an ego that says we can accomplish anything, and yet this happens and no one has a real answer for it. No one really knows what to do about it. And so Twitter and Facebook lights up, and then songs are written wondering where the love is and what love really means, where it is in this world. But no one's really asking the question, which I think is the elephant in the room. Where in the world is wisdom? Where in the world is wisdom? Just think about that for a moment. When everyone's calling for love and kind of this really strange definition of what love is anyone asking the question, where is wisdom in our culture? Well, maybe there's a few people that are doing it. Kelly Clarkson kind of has her version of wisdom. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Well, what she's saying is that, you know, of course, when you go through difficulty, you learn lessons that make you stronger. And there's something about that, you know, that's true. But the problem is that most people don't learn those lessons. And people make the same mistakes over and over again. And the heart behind this message is about self-empowerment and being strong-willed. But is it really satisfying the human heart? Is it really actually reaching in and giving us what we really need? And so the question is wisdom really just about learning lessons to make you stronger? Is that the wisdom that our culture needs, just to learn lessons from the past in order to make us stronger as a culture? That seems to be the approach that we're taking. Well, if chapter 1 was about misplaced glory, where the vessels were taken out of the temple, then chapter 2 is all about missing wisdom. And culture's inability to deliver answers that satisfy our desire for security and transcendence. And this is crucial for us as Christians living by faith on two levels. What is the wisdom that you possess in your life? What is the wisdom that you possess in your life that gives you hope and that gives you stability? And secondly, what is the wisdom that you are holding out for our world? What is the wisdom that you have both verbally and the way that you live that gives hope and stability to our world? And so I want to kind of break down the text for you. I don't usually do this. Now, last week, I do apologize. Last week I had 4 eyes. It just worked out like this. And this week I have 5 eyes. And it just worked out. It just happened. So I apologize. But this is how it works. Firstly, we see Nebuchadnezzar's insecurity. Then we see the wise men's inadequacy. Then we see Daniel's intervention, God's illumination, and we see Nebuchadnezzar's ignorance. And so firstly, we see Nebuchadnezzar's insecurity. And so at the beginning of chapter 2, we saw that we land right in the middle of Nebuchadnezzar's frustration about a lack of wisdom. He's woken up from a bad dream, and verse 1 says that his spirit was troubled by it. Now, some recap on Nebuchadnezzar. He's basically the world's first hybrid between political leader and celebrity. He's kind of like Donald Trump. I don't want to kind of offend anyone, but kind of like that. And he sort of, he's carried away 10,000 of the best from Jerusalem to serve his interests, to refine his image, to expand his kingdom. And he also kind of dabbles in the things of God as it suits him and his political interests. But all that seems under threat, doesn't it? Because of this very troubling dream that he has. And so verse 2 says what he does about it. He goes and commands the magicians, enchanters, the sorcerers to appear before him, not only to interpret the dream, but to actually tell him what the dream was. You see, Nebuchadnezzar was smart. He knows what they're going to do. If he tells them the dream, they'll just come up with some interpretation of their own just to kind of appease him. And so he wants to know that there's something deeper than that they can actually tell him the dream and then interpret the dream. Well, while Nebuchadnezzar was powerful and popular, he was deeply insecure, wasn't he? This is why he goes to this lengths, because he's deeply insecure. He had this sneaking suspicion that the dream that he had was a threat to his empire. And when human empires are threatened, human strength proves very, very fragile. And so it's important to Nebuchadnezzar, so much so that he gives this ultimatum. Firstly, tell me the dream and you'll be showered with gifts and honor. Or if you can't tell me the dream, you're going to be torn limb from limb. This is what happens when personal empires are threatened. When our personal kingdoms are threatened, we become hostile, insecure, don't we? We lash out with anger, with an outburst of emotion when our personal kingdoms are threatened. And so Nebuchadnezzar's insecurity, it defines a culture that is hostile and angry and kind of insecure because its personal kingdom is being threatened. So this is Nebuchadnezzar's insecurity. And secondly, we see the advisors in inadequacy. They say, tell us the dream. And they say that twice because they know that Nebuchadnezzar is hostile and insecure. And so they are trying to buy time, and Nebuchadnezzar sees this. They say this after being exasperated and, of course, not being able to know what the dream is in verse 10. There is not a man on earth who can meet the king's demand, for no great and powerful king has asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or Chaldean. The thing that the king asks is difficult, and no one can show it to the king except the gods whose dwelling is not with flesh. What are they saying here? What are they saying? 3 things, 3 observations. The first one is this: we're actually extremely limited naturalists. That's what they're saying. We don't have the answers that you're looking for. We're the enchanters, yes, we're the magicians, we're supposed to be the people in touch with God. But actually what they say, when it comes down to the point, we're extremely limited naturalists. We're no better than anybody else. And this is the very next point. They say no one else can answer either. What's their recognition? We're in the same category of creation as everybody else is. We're human. We're human. We don't have the answers. We do not have any special ability. And so firstly, they're extremely limited naturalists, and so is everyone else in the kingdom. And thirdly, most significantly, do not miss this, they say this: you cannot have a God who is both transcendent and immanent. You cannot possibly have a God who is both far and near. Look what they say. No one can show it to the king except the gods whose dwelling is not with flesh. They're far away. The gods are far away. So hold that thought. Hold that thought. They believe that you cannot have a God who is both far and near, transcendent and immanent. And so their inadequacy enrages Nebuchadnezzar's insecurity, who gives them a death sentence in verse 12. And so imagine the panic and the fear amongst these wise men as the decree goes out. And what we have to remember is that Daniel and his friends are included. They were part of the king's court, so they also have a death sentence on their life. And so what we see here, remarkably in verse 14, is Daniel's intervention. How does he intervene? Well, verse 14, notice, it says that he replied with prudence and discretion. Prudence and discretion. What does that mean? This is how I would describe that. without making a public scene so as to embarrass the king, or to self-pity, or scream injustice, in a dignified way he sought to question and reason with the king. This was his approach. He doesn't panic, he doesn't scream injustice, he doesn't yell at the culture, he doesn't self-pity. He, without making a public scene, he goes to reason and question with the king. And notice this, what is startling about this in verse 19. And Daniel went in and requested the king. So he hears the death sentence, and then he goes in and he requested the king to appoint him a time that he might show the interpretation of the king. Does anyone see the startling thing about this? He doesn't know the dream yet. He doesn't even have the interpretation of the dream yet. God hasn't given it to him. But he has such faith in God, such faith that he makes the appointment. He makes the appointment. This is what living with wisdom in exile is about. It's about demonstrating faith. Even when you can't see what God is doing, even when you can't see what is happening, you demonstrate faith. You step out before you know. And I want to ask you this morning, what in your life right now requires a deep expression of faith rather than a response of fear? Rather than a response of fear, you actually express a deep sense of faith, stepping out even though you don't know all the answers. This is what Daniel does. Second thing, before he went to the king, he went to the king. Before he went to the king, he went to the king, the source of all wisdom. You see, I want to ask you this morning. What in your life are you trying to manage on your own? Are you trying to get all the answers from, look within yourself to kind of get the answers from, and you haven't actually been to the king? You haven't actually been to God to seek him and his answers for it. And thirdly, he gives credit where the credit is due. And I want to ask you that this morning. What have you received from God that you are not responding with thanksgiving to? What have you received from God that you're not responding with thanksgiving to? Well, verse 20 is the prayer of thanksgiving, which reveals Daniel's heart in all this. That Daniel answered and said, "Blessed be the name of God forever and ever." Look where he says it's the source of all wisdom, to whom belong wisdom and might. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and he sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. To you, O God of my fathers, I give thanks and praise, for you have given me wisdom and might, and have now made known to me what we asked of you, for you have made known to us the king's matter. And so notice what Daniel does here. In his thanksgiving, he faithfully distinguishes mere human wisdom with the source of supernatural revelation. The wisdom of God. It's a different category. It's a different category. God is in a different category to human wisdom. His wisdom, his revelation transcends mere human wisdom. This is Isaiah 55. For my thoughts are not your thoughts. Neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Daniel has been given revelation that transcends mere human wisdom. And this alone is what sets him apart from the rest. It's this and this alone. He's the recipient of revelation, of supernatural revelation. And he's at pains to explain this, Daniel is. He's at pains to explain it to Nebuchadnezzar. He says in verse 27, "No wise men, enchanters, magicians, or astrologers can show to the king the mystery that the king has asked. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the visions of your head as you lay in bed are these. To you, O king, as you lay in bed came thoughts of what would be after this. And he who reveals mysteries made known to you what is to be. But as for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because of any wisdom that I have, more than all the living, but in order that the interpretation may be made known to the king, and that you may know the thoughts of your mind." What made Daniel more complete As a faithful man in exile, he was the recipient of supernatural revelation from an all-wise, all-powerful God. He recognized that he could not live his life resting on his own wisdom. He couldn't face life from the inside of himself out, but he needed something from outside to come in. It is not Daniel, nor his companions, or the wise men of the king's court, nor any political system, nor any academic that is the source of wisdom to answer the questions of this culture. It is the revelation of God. It is the true wisdom of God. It is revelation that cuts through mere information. It's revelation that cuts up mere human wisdom. And I'm telling you, folks, this is what you need in your life. This is what you need in your life. You need revelation from above. You need wisdom from an all-powerful God. You see where Daniel's reliance is? You see the very foundation of his life? It's to rest and rely upon the wisdom and the revelation of God. You know, today in our churches, we must understand this more than ever. Because what is happening is that mere human wisdom is coming in and it is infecting the revelation of God. And I want to tell you how there's a shift away from believing in the power of the gospel. The gospel doesn't really work. We need to actually add more things to the gospel in order to make it really work. And I want to show you how we do this. Firstly, through the therapeutic gospel. This is how it goes. Sin robs you of feeling happy. Christ's death gives us the potential to be happy again. The church helps us find happiness through uplifting advice to make us feel and be better. This is the therapeutic gospel that we're hearing in our time. Secondly, the moralist gospel. Our big problem, the big problem with humanity, is our sins, plural. Not sin in our nature. Sins, plural. And so what happens is Christ's death just makes us better people, makes us sin less. And redemption comes through personal willpower, where we're just trying to stop sinning, not realizing that Christ's death has actually covered our entire sinful nature, that we are infected to the core with sin. And so what this does is it leads us into moral living, thinking that it's just about being better. Thirdly, the activist gospel. The big problem that we have is a lack of social cohesion. And so the power of the gospel is demonstrated by transforming the culture. The church is united around political causes and social projects. And this is how we are seeing earthly wisdom come in and infect the true gospel, the true revelation of God. And I want to challenge you about this. What is the wisdom that you possess for your own life? What is the wisdom that you possess? What is the wisdom that is giving you hope and stability? And secondly, what is the wisdom that you are giving to our culture? By the way that you speak, by the advice that you give. Are you just knocking on people's hearts or bashing people's hearts with the blunt instrument? Or do you rely on the revelation of God? So what is it? What is the revelation of God? Well, the answer is in the interpretation that God gave to Daniel. God's illumination. And we see it here from verse 31. You saw, O king, and behold a great image. This image, mighty and of exceeding brightness, stood before you, and its appearance was frightening. The head of this image was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its middle and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. As you looked, a stone was cut out by no human hand, and it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold all together were broken in pieces and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away so that not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. What could that mean? Well, we're going to get into the prophetic nature of this in chapter 7. But to Nebuchadnezzar, in that moment, it meant this. Daniel gives us the interpretation from verse 36. It says, "This was the dream. Now we will tell the king its interpretation. You, O king, the King of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power and the might and the glory, and into whose hand he has given wherever they dwell the children of man, the beasts of the field and the birds of the heavens, making you rule over them all. You are the head of gold." Now what's Daniel saying? Saying, in your dream, you saw yourself. And you saw everything that you have has been given to you by God. Did you notice that? Everything has been, all your rule, all your power has been given to you by God. Then the next thing we see in verse 39 and 40 is this: "Another kingdom inferior to you shall arise after you." Can you imagine telling a king that there would be an after him? Can you imagine this? Can you imagine telling a king there's going to be an after you? What's he saying to him? He said, you saw that there's an after you. You saw that you're actually very limited. That you're actually in the same category, that you're just a human, and that there's going to be a kingdom that comes after you. In verse 41, we see, "And you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron. It shall be a divided kingdom, but some of the firmness of iron shall be in it, just as you saw iron mixed with soft clay." What's he saying? You saw that the culture of the last days is going to be compromised, and it's going to be divided, and it's going to be brittle. And then fourthly, he said that you saw that all of it had a soft and an insecure foundation. Because what happens is there's a stone from outside of the image that comes in and smashes the feet of clay and destroys it. You saw that this culture of the last days is going to have an insecure foundation. And then fifthly, you saw this: a kingdom that is built into a stone that will become a mountain, that will fill the whole earth, that will last forever. This is what you saw. Where is this all leading? Where is this revelation leading? What is this wisdom? Well, this is the stone that Isaiah spoke of in Isaiah 28. "Thus says the Lord, behold, I am the one who has laid as a foundation in Zion, a stone, a tested stone, a precious cornerstone of a sure foundation. Whoever believes will not be in haste." The revelation and the wisdom of God that surpasses all wisdom of the world, the highest office, the halls of the university, the people that mock Christianity as lunacy. No height of wisdom will ever be able to compare with this stone that has revealed himself in the person of Jesus Christ, who Daniel spoke of, and Isaiah spoke of, and Peter spoke of, and Paul spoke of. This is the kingdom of Jesus, who will reign in an unshakable kingdom, who will smash the kingdoms of the world, and this kingdom will grow up into a mountain that will last forever. This is true wisdom. To be attached to Jesus Christ in an everlasting relationship. What made Daniel 10 times better? He was in relationship with that God. See, many people think that being a Christian is making wise decisions and learning lessons and being good to be 10 times better, but it's far deeper than that. It's a revelation that you can have a relationship with God through Jesus Christ. That is true wisdom. You can be the most intellectually inept person and have a relationship with God and be wiser than anybody. You see, true wisdom is not lessons to be learned, but a relationship to be enjoyed. True wisdom is not lessons to be learned, it's a relationship to be enjoyed. If you're exploring Christianity, you might wonder to yourself, how does it go from here to here? If you're a person who's stale in your Christian faith, in your relationship with God, you might be wondering, how does it go from here back to here again? You don't fight these human conditions with worldly wisdom. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You open the eyes of your heart and you see this revelation clearly. You see that your existence and everything that you have has been given to you by God. You see that there's an after you, that you have one life. You see that you are compromised by sin as part of your nature. You are divided. You see that that is an insecure foundation to rest your life on. And you see that a stone came from outside of you to this earth to take your place on the cross in the person of Jesus Christ, to plant your feet on a kingdom unshakable. And this goes from something that is just intellectual to a deep heart knowledge of repentance and belief. And the question is, do you possess the wisdom and the revelation of God? Are you searching for religious experience, the doorway with the light at the top that you think you have to climb on your own? Jesus says, I've already come down. Repent and believe and you'll know me. And you'll be in relationship with me. What made Daniel refuse the king's food? He wasn't being religious. He was living out wisdom. He was living out the wisdom of his relationship with God. He was cultivating it. You see this in his life. What did he do when his life was under threat? He stepped out in faith. He went and told his friends about it. They prayed. They communed with God. They cultivated their relationship with God. They sat under his ministry and they waited for him to answer, and they waited for him to lead them on. Daniel's living out of an utterly different story, an utterly different narrative to those around him, a relationship with the one true God. That was the revelation that saved him. That was the revelation that equipped him to live wisely in exile. And so hear this. Wisdom, true wisdom, is not lessons to be learned. It's a relationship to be enjoyed. You know, Paul says this: when it comes to how you approach culture, we impart a secret wisdom, a hidden wisdom of God, which God decreed before the ages for our glory. This is the message that we have. And so what was Nebuchadnezzar's response to the interpretation? What was his response? Well, have a look. Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face and he paid homage to Daniel. And then he declared with his lips, right? Truly, your God is God of gods and the Lord of kings and the revealer of mysteries. For you have been able to reveal this mystery. Nebuchadnezzar suspects that there's something about Daniel. But then look in verse 48, he gives gifts to Daniel. Verse 49, he keeps Daniel close to his side because that's going to be of extreme benefit to him. But look at verse 1 of chapter 3. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold. And so he didn't really get it. He responded like a religious person. He took the lesson, but he didn't take the relationship. Say the right thing, make an offering, give gifts. But his heart showed that he was hard toward God, and we're going to see the pain of that decision in chapter 4. But Nebuchadnezzar's response makes crucial our response. Are you wise in your own eyes? Is the foundation of your life worldly wisdom? Are you prideful in your heart about that worldly wisdom? You're happy to stand on it? You're happy to hold on to it? Then Paul's message is for you, this verse in 1 Corinthians 26-30. He called this out. He said, consider your calling, brothers. Not many of you are wise according to worldly standards. You're in the same category. Not many were powerful, not many were of noble birth. But God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised in the world, even the things that are not, to bring to nothing the things that are, so that no human being might boast in the presence of God. And because of him, you are in Christ Jesus, who became to us wisdom from God, righteousness and sanctification and redemption, so that as it is written, let the one boast in the Lord. What is the most wise we can be? The most wise we can be is to be in a relationship with God and to cultivate a relationship with God and to hold out a vision to our culture that is not just worldly advice, but is the revelation of God, the gospel. It's interesting, the magicians and the enchanters and the wise men of this story, they had no answers, did they? No answers. They were lost for words. But 700 years after this, we learn from Matthew 2 that the wise men from the east, which were the descendants of the Babylonians, the Medes, the Persians, likely the descendants with the same traditions, they traveled to Jerusalem to worship a king born in Bethlehem. Why? Not because of their earthly wisdom, but because of revelation that a ruler would come, that it would come from the tribe of Judah, that he would shepherd the people of God. And God would prove that he is both transcendent, he is both far and high above us, and he is near. He is imminent. And we see that in the person of Jesus. And so they came with their gold and their frankincense and their myrrh to Jesus, the cornerstone. And this is what true wisdom is. It's not lessons to be learned to become better than you are now. It's to bring your gift. It's to bring a worshipful gift to the Lord and to make him your all, to make Jesus the cornerstone of your life. And so what is faith in exile? It's living with true wisdom, a personal relationship with Jesus. And this is the message that we proclaim to our culture. Let's pray.